Hello students, let us discuss question and answers of Biodiversity ICSE Environmental Science. Define biodiversity. Biological diversity or biodiversity is a term we use to describe the variety of life on earth. It refers to the variety of living organisms, plants, animals, their habitat, their genes, and even the ecosystems. What do you mean by the term wildlife? Wildlife refers to undomesticated animal species but has come to include all organisms that grow or live wild in an area without being introduced by humans. All the animals, birds, fish, reptiles, and insects are a part of the earth-rich wildlife. Wildlife also includes animals and their products, that is skins, ivory, plants and their products, that is seeds, wax, natural pigments, etc. Define wildlife management. Wildlife management takes into consideration the ecological principles such as carrying capacity of the habitat, preservation and control of habitat, reforestation, predator control, reintroduction of extinct species, capture and reallocation of abundant species, and management of desirable or undesirable species. What is the importance of wildlife? Wildlife is commercially valuable and it is important for commercial purposes. Animal, plant and marine biodiversity keeps ecosystem functional. Healthy ecosystems allows us to survive, get enough food to eat and make a living. Importance of wildlife for commercial purposes. A number of animals are reared for fur and skin, for domestic purposes, of plowing of field or to carry loads such as bulls, oxen, horses, etc. For medicines, for entertainment, a large number of animals are trained for performing activities in circuses, TV shows, on the streets, etc. For personal collection, people collect wildlife products in huge numbers. What are national parks? National park is a protected area which is strictly reserved for the betterment of wildlife, and the activities like forestry, grazing of animals and agriculture is not permitted. They are set up for preserving flora, fauna and landscape of an area. For example, Jim Corbett National Park in Uttarakhand is famous for tigers, elephants, leopards. Kaziranga National Park in Assam is famous for rhinoceros, Indian bison, swamp deer. What are sanctuaries? Sanctuaries are places where the killing or capturing of any animal is prohibited. A wildlife sanctuary is a protected area that is reserved for the conservation of only wildlife animals and plant species. Human activities like harvesting of timber, collection of minor forest products, and private ownership rights are allowed. Examples: Bharatpur Bird Sanctuary in Rajasthan, Gir Lion Sanctuary in Gujarat. What are biosphere reserves? Biosphere reserves are a special category of protected area of land or coastal environment which aims at conservation of ecosystems and genetic resources contained in them. A biosphere reserve is a landscape which is usually large in size. It is established as a way of integrating habitat conservation with the interest of the local community. Examples: Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. It includes parts of Tamil Nadu, Kerala and Karnataka. Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve in Uttarakhand. Sundarban Biosphere Reserve in West Bengal. State any two objectives of biosphere reserves. First is, in the biosphere reserves, attention is paid to gene pool and the biodiversity is significantly managed. The sustainable development function in particular is a distinguishing feature of biosphere reserve. Mention any two man-made factors that lead to the loss of biodiversity. In modern times, due to human activities, species and ecosystems are threatened as never before. There are two man-made factors that lead to the loss of biodiversity. First, overhunting and poaching has been a significant cause of loss of biodiversity and threatening of a number of species, for example, tigers, rhinos, etc. Second, overuse of resources. The growing population consumes more resources. We have degraded or destroyed half of the world forest, depleted the fossil fuels, overuse of minerals, fresh water resources, etc. We even overharvested the ocean resources. Define rare species and endangered species. Rare species are those which are not common in the world. They are localized within a restricted geographical area of habitat, for example, Nilgiri Thar. Endangered species are the species which are the verge of extinction. If the present situation of danger continues, these species are not expected to survive. Examples: the great Indian bustard, lion-tailed macaque. What do you mean by hunting and poaching? Hunting is a chasing and killing of wild animals by people or other animals for food or as a sport. The most common reason for humans to hunt are to harvest food, that is for meat, and useful animal products like fur, hide, bone, tusk, horn, antler, etc. Poaching is the illegal trafficking and killing of wildlife. Sometimes animals or plant parts are sold as trophies or folk medicines, that is the medicines using herbal and other remedies based on traditional beliefs, and sometimes they are sold as pets or house plants. With more tigers kept captive than living wild, the scope of poaching cannot be overstated. State any two aims of Project Tiger. Aims of Project Tiger: to increase the population of tigers in the natural habitat, maintain a viable number of tigers and its habitat, to protect the tigers from extinction and to check upon illegal poaching of tigers. State the difference between a core zone and a buffer zone in a tiger reserve. Natural zone or core zone is the inner part where all sorts of human activities are completely prohibited or banned. It is legally protected for conservation. Buffer zone is a zone present next to the core zone. In this area, research, educational and management activities are carried out, that is, limited human activities are allowed. Expand the following CITES sites. IUCN CITES is Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Flora and Fauna. IUCN International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. Name some national parks, sanctuaries and biosphere reserves of India. National parks: Jim Corbett National Park in Nainital and Pauri Garhwal in the state of Uttarakhand, Kanha National Park in Madhya Pradesh, Kaziranga National Park in Assam, Sundarban National Park in West Bengal. Sanctuaries: Bharatpur Bird Sanctuary in Rajasthan, Manas Wildlife Sanctuary and National Park in Assam, Gir National Park and Lion Sanctuary, Gujarat. Biosphere reserves: Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. It includes parts of Tamil Nadu, Kerala and Karnataka. Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve in Uttarakhand, Sundarban Biosphere Reserve in West Bengal. State any two objectives of the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Objectives are: this act strictly prohibits hunting and poaching of wild animals, prohibition of picking, uprooting of specific plants, prohibition of hunting but permitted in certain cases, and constitution of Wildlife Advisory Board. List any two methods of in situ conservation. In situ conservation involves conserving wildlife in their natural habitats through a network of protected areas like national parks, wildlife sanctuaries and biosphere reserves. Name the two human activities that affect earth resources. First activity is loss of habitat or habitat alteration. Is directly linked to human induced pressure on land. Alteration to ecosystems is a critical factor contributing to species and habitat loss. The main causes of habitat loss are agriculture activities, mining, development of human settlement and industry. Second is over-harvesting or over-hunting, overfishing or over-collecting. A species-changing consumption pattern of humans is always cited as a key reason for unsustainable exploitation of natural resources. Long answer questions. Examine the importance of biosphere reserves in the present scenario of exploitation of wildlife. Biosphere reserves are a special category of protected areas of land or coastal environment which aims at conservation of ecosystems and genetic resources contained in them. A biosphere reserve is a landscape which is usually large in size. It is established as a way of integrating habitat conservation with the interest of the local community. To protect larger natural wildlife regions than the typical national park or animal refuge, the Indian government has established 18 biosphere reserves, most of which are one or more national parks or preserves and buffer zones that are available for commercial uses. Importance of biosphere reserves are: the key goal of each biosphere reserve is to conserve natural form for biodiversity, flora and fauna. In the trees or other products, the surrounding region will be used for testing and exploration. Next, through promoting the wise use of natural and human resources, reserves of the biosphere help to ensure biological, economic and social sustainable growth in this area. Biosphere reserves provide realistic approaches to settle disputes over land use and protect biodiversity. Discuss any 4 causes for the loss of biodiversity. In modern times, due to human activities, species and ecosystems are threatened as never before. There are factors that lead to the loss of biodiversity. First factor, overhunting and poaching has been a significant cause of loss of biodiversity and threatening of a number of species, for example tigers, rhinos, etc. Second cause, overuse of resources. The growing population consumes more resources. We have degraded or destroyed half of the world forests, depleted the fossil fuels, overuse of minerals, fresh water resources, etc. We even overharvested the ocean resources. Third, loss of habitat or habitat alteration is directly linked to human-induced pressure on land. Alteration to ecosystem is a critical factor contributing to species and habitat loss. The main cause of habitat loss are agricultural activities, mining, development of human settlement and industry. Fourth cause, overharvesting or overhunting, overfishing or over collecting a species. Changing consumption pattern of humans is always cited as the key reason for unsustainable exploitation of natural resources. Describe any 5 conservation strategies for saving biodiversity. The conservation of biodiversity refers to the conservation of all creatures on earth. It is the conservation of habitat required for them and is also the conservation of genetic characters. Conservation of animals requires the conservation of habitat and ecosystem. 5 conservation strategies for saving biodiversity. First is Project Tiger 1973 to increase the population of tigers in the natural habitat, maintain a viable number of tigers and its habitats, to protect the tigers from extinction and to check upon illegal poaching of tigers. Second strategy, Wildlife Protection Act 1972. This act strictly prohibits hunting and poaching of wild animals, prohibition of picking, uprooting of specific plants, prohibition of hunting but permitted in certain cases, and constitution of Wildlife Advisory Board. Third strategy, IUCN, was established in 1948. It has prepared a red data book which includes about 450 species of flora and fauna which come under endangered categories. IUCN has marked various species and categories of species into endangered species, only vulnerable species, rare species and extinct species. IUCN has observer and consultation status at the United Nations and plays a role in the implementation of several international conventions on nature, conservation and biodiversity. Fourth strategy, the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands 1971. The conservation and wise use of all wetland through local, regional and national actions and international cooperation to achieve sustainable development throughout the world. Wetlands provide fundamental ecological services and sources of biodiversity at all levels of species, genetics and ecosystem. Wetlands constitute resources of great economic, scientific, cultural, and recreational values for the community. Wetlands also play a vital role in climate change, adaptation, and mitigation. So, wetlands should be restored and rehabilitated wherever possible. Wetlands should be conserved by ensuring their wise use. Fifth strategy, the Convention on Biological Diversity, that is CBD, and the objectives are conservation of biological diversity, followed by the sustainable use of the components of biological diversity and the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits arising out the utilization of genetic resources. Next question, what is ex-situ conservation? Discuss any 4 advantages of ex-situ conservation. Ex-situ conservation refers to the protection of the species outside their natural habitats in artificial conditions under human care. Ex-situ conservation involves the maintenance and breeding of endangered plant and animal species under partially or fully controlled conditions. When the population of some species declines or there is threat of extinction for some species, they are protected through maintaining artificial conditions under human care. In such cases, ex-situ conservation is done. Examples: zoological parks, botanical gardens, aquarium, agricultural research center, and forestry institutions, DNA bank, gene bank, tissue culture are the artificial habitats for ex-situ conservation. Advantages of ex-situ conservation: first, it is very useful method for endangered species and is also creates awareness among the public. Second, it is a very useful method for conducting research and scientific work on different species of fauna and flora. Third, it is a good source for generating revenues. Fourth, animals are completely protected from hunting and poaching. Breeding of animals that are endangered in restricted or captive areas is done, such as zoo, aquarium, research center, etc. Next question, write in detail about the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. The Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 refers to a legislation enacted in 1972 by the Government of India. Wildlife Protection Act is an act to provide for the protection of wild animals, birds, and plants and for the matters connected with them. The Act has provisions which empower the central government to create machinery for the purpose of wildlife protection. The aims of wildlife protections are: first, constitution of Wildlife Advisory Board; second, prohibition of picking, uprooting of specific plants; third, prohibition of hunting but permitted in certain cases; fourth, declaration of sanctuary, national parks, biosphere reserves; fifth, maintenance of records of wild animals killed; sixth, appointment of director, chief, wildlife and warden and other officers; seventh, allocation duties of the Wildlife Advisory Board; eighth, punishment of wrong declaration; ninth, this act strictly prohibits hunting and poaching of wild animals. Next question, explain any 5 important steps needed to preserve wildlife. Now the important steps are: flora and fauna or plant, animals and microorganisms that have not been domesticated by humans make up wildlife. Conservation, on the other hand, is the preservation and protection of wild plants, wildlife and their ecosystems. As a result, we may conclude that wildlife conservation is needed to understand the value of nature and other wildlife species. The large-scale killing of wild animals and birds by humans is a major threat to wildlife survival. This has an effect on the food chain as well as on the environment. With the aid of an example, we can better understand. Snake skin is in high demand for making fancy leather products, so snake skin sells at a high price in the market. Some people kill snakes in large number indiscriminately in order to make quick money. The killing of snakes causes a disruption in the food chain and an imbalance in nature. Now the steps to conserve wildlife. First step, any legislation should be enacted to make it legal to kill or capture endangered animals or birds. it needs to be made a criminal offense. Such laws should be strictly followed and not only exist on paper. Second, forest authorities should not allow the indiscriminate killing of wild birds and animals regardless of their abundance. Third, more national parks and sanctuaries should be built throughout the country to protect the natural environments of wild animals and birds. Fourth, the Department of Government should conduct a wildlife conservation survey in all forests on a regular basis. They should be knowledgeable about the populations of all wild animals and bird species so that they can be aided during floods and famines. Fifth, we should pay special attention to the survival of endangered wild animals and birds in order to avoid their extinction. Next question, what are national parks, wildlife sanctuaries and biosphere reserves? Discuss their objectives. National park is a protected area which is strictly reserved for the betterment of wildlife, and the activities like forestry, grazing of animals and agriculture is not permitted. They are set up for preserving flora, fauna and landscape of an area. For example, Jim Corbett National Park in Uttarakhand is famous for tigers, elephants and leopards. Kaziranga National Park in Assam is famous for rhinoceros, Indian bison, swamp deer. Objectives of national park: they protect wildlife and their habitats from human impact and destruction. They provide animals a safe space to survive and reproduce. They protect places of natural beauty and a home to several endemic species. Wildlife sanctuaries are places where the killing or capturing of any animal is prohibited. A wildlife sanctuary is protected area that is reserved for the conservation of only wildlife, animals and plant species. Human activities like harvesting of timber, collection of minor forest products and private ownership rights are allowed. Example, Bharatpur Bird Sanctuary, Gir Lion Sanctuary. Objectives of wildlife sanctuaries: the wildlife sanctuaries are established to protect the endangered species. It is quite difficult to always relocate the animals from their natural habitat. Therefore, protecting them in their natural environment is advantageous. The endangered species are especially monitored in the wildlife sanctuaries. Biosphere reserves are a special category of protected area of land or coastal environment which aims at conservation of ecosystems and genetic resources contained in them. A biosphere reserve is a landscape which is usually large in size. It is established as a way of integrating habitat conservation with the interest of the local community. Examples: Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve, Sundarban Biosphere Reserve. Objectives of Biosphere Reserve: in the Biosphere Reserves, attention is paid to gene pool and the biodiversity is significantly managed. Next objective: the Sustainable Development Function in particular is a distinguishing feature of Biosphere Reserve. So that's all for today. Like, share and subscribe this channel. Till then, happy learning. Bye bye.